or not. But what you want to create is a menu of opportunities that your entire membership can look at and think about how they want to become involved. When I do a campaign, my clients will see a 50 to 80% of their sponsors have never sponsored before because of either the increased opportunity or the relationship ask. So we will continue to look at that. But how can you look at the entire year's activities? That may not sound possible or even practical to think about. How would you do that? How do you know a year in advance what you're going to do? We have to be flexible. We don't know when our legislator is available to come speak at our chamber next year. We can't book that ahead of time. Well, that's true, but there's a lot that we do know. So let's start there and then, quote unquote, eat this elephant one bite at a time as we go forward. So first, list your largest event, your primary publications, and your electronic media, your electronic communication tools. Think about all the opportunities inherent in each of those events or publications. Again, we'll look at some examples in just a few moments. How many ways do you have within an individual event to give someone recognition? So think about that. Is there a reception before? Is there entertainment? Is there a stage? Is there a head table? Do you have primary seating? How do you market that event? Can you give them exposure in that marketing? So we'll talk about that as we go forward. After you do that, now of course we don't have time to go through that process because it takes some time to go through all of your events. We are very busy people in the chamber business. So second, list the remaining activities conducted by each department or staff person. Today I'm in quote-unquote sunny Ames, Iowa. It is wind about 30 miles an hour and snow blowing here today, but I'm working with Dan Colhane, and he asked me to give you guys a shout out and tell you hello. But when I first started meeting with Dan, he said, Joyce, we do a lot of sponsorships. Can you tell me what you're talking about an expanded sponsorship revenue? So I started listing some items just off the top of my head that we might be talking about. And he looked at me and smiled and said, oh, okay, you just list 4 out of the 5 things you just listed we don't get sponsorships on. So sometimes we get hung up in getting sponsorship for our big items, but then we don't look at everything and where the opportunities are because, quite frankly, we don't have time to go sell them. So list everything, no matter how insignificant you think it might be. Is it your ambassador program? Is it your membership materials? Is it your folders that you send materials out in? Is it your envelopes that you send your materials out in? Is it an event that you only have 20 people there, but it's a regular group and they focus on some exciting items, or there may be a company that wants to support that? Keep all of those in mind. One of my big surprises in being a consultant is one time I had a client that for their ambassador program, they had a CPA firm that gave them $5,000 to support that every year. Now, I wouldn't count on that. I've not seen that before or since, but you never know where some loyalties are out there and what they want to sponsor. So list everything, no matter how insignificant you think it may be. Brainstorm. Let yourself go with that. You, your staff, as well as your board members, and certainly your business community will be very surprised by the volume of events, programs, and electronic media and publications that you create every year. We rarely list them all. I think it makes us tired to think about it, so we just kind of keep going through our mode. But you have an extraordinary list. Generally, when I work with a client and we flush out all of their sponsorship revenue, we will have approximately 4 to 5 times the dollar value available than they've ever sold before. Very little of that from raising prices, most of that from expanded opportunities. So keep that in mind. It may seem daunting to think about having to market all those options. Bear with me. In a few moments, we're going to consider the possibility that you don't have to sell these sponsorships yourself. You can have dozens of sponsorship opportunities with many different levels and price ranges because you don't have to make the sale Volunteers can do that for you, but we'll explore that in a little bit. Our role as staff and in this process is to create value and define that value so that your staff or your volunteers, your committee members can communicate it to their business associates and friends. We're just getting ready to explore that process. So now let's look at some examples of sponsorship development. Now, I've just picked a few. I could have picked hundreds, probably thousands that we're going to go through. Some of these samples may be very familiar to you. Some of them may not. I wanted to get something you could relate to and then expand your horizons just a bit. So we're going to walk through some of these. Golf tournaments. Well, we all do one of those, don't we? Because we can make a lot of revenue on those. So all I wanted you to see with this example is the list of potential sponsors. I chose this one because they have a lot there. You notice I don't even have teams, golf teams and that type of thing in here, but I just wanted you to see some of the options. I also want you to note that not everything sold that was available. Most of it did, but when you create options, it doesn't mean you have to sell out, and it doesn't mean that if the cocktail sponsor doesn't sell, that it was a bad idea. It just means it didn't sell this time around. It's very interesting to see what our sponsors purchase and what they don't, and it even shifts some from year to year. What we are looking to do today and in your future sponsorship development is maximize your revenue potential. In other words, how much money can we make on this off of sponsorship, and where will those float? Let's just see what happens. It's pretty surprising what sponsors will choose sometimes, and it's also surprising what they don't choose sometimes. So we're creating opportunities and letting them decide. The next example you're going to see is the Chamber Weekly Email. I chose this one because I like its creativity just a little bit. Now, this is a sample from a very small chamber. I think they have around 400 members and a small community. And I want you to look at this email, weekly email sponsorship opportunity. Again, I didn't list prices on these because I don't want you guys to get hung up on pricing yet. What will sell in one community for $10,000 may sell for another community for, for $1,000. We're not talking about that yet. That's the next part of our conversation. Right now, we're just developing sponsorship opportunities. So take a look at this. They have the opportunity for a top banner advertiser in that weekly email. Notice they say it goes to 1,400 business professionals. They have the opportunity for a side banner, a middle banner, and then another side banner. So they've surrounded this email in sponsorship opportunities, and it is a weekly email. You can create the opportunity to sponsor that weekly email for the month. You can do that by the quarter. You can do that by the week, however you choose to do that. Do they all need to sell? Not particularly. It's really nice when they do. Taking a look at this one, you realize that this is a very small organization. They're sending out a lot of emails. And with this opportunity, they have, I believe they had the opportunity to make, I don't know, $600 or $700 a week on that email. So that adds up through the year. Just wanted you to see how that can work when you think about it. Now, we all have trends too. We have things we've done for years, and then sometimes new opportunities arise. One of the reasons I chose these next two examples is I like to use sponsorships to carry the message of my mission with the chamber. For instance, people expect a Chamber of Commerce to be involved in economic development and commerce and creating business. Even if you have a separate economic development foundation or corporation within your community that's not part of the chamber, it is very much within your mission to have an economic forecast or an economic summit, something that gives a business an opportunity to come learn and network at the same time. Sometimes we get a little too hung up on networking opportunities and forget that you can network at a program that has a lot of substance and a lot of information that helps our businesses run a better business and stay better informed. We need them. We need successful, informed business people, and it's part of our role to do that. Diversity and inclusion partnerships is a trend I've seen a number of my clients have as some of their communities are challenged by other people moving into their community, learning to live together, exploring that. I found that there's been some major dollars invested in some of these sponsorships. So I want to challenge you. For instance, I talked to Dan this morning in Ames, Iowa. They have Iowa State University here. Agriculture, they're one of the top agriculture colleges in the country. We're in the middle of Iowa, one of our primary agricultural states. We talked about the future of agronomics within Iowa. What does that mean to the economy? How does that look? Looking at that forecast. What is the university doing? Having the president of the university come speak. Remember to build within your event really good content, because that will drive your sponsorship revenue very well, very nicely, and it also provides benefit to your member. Proper sponsorship development not only grows your revenue, it improves the impact of your members' bottom line, and it educates and provides services to your member. There are very few things that I suggest developing sponsorships for just for the revenue. I know that sounds like heresy on this phone call, but you don't have to choose dollars over service to your members. The most powerful revenue streams are those that provide service to your members. The next example you see was a fun one for me, because I was working with a client in a metro area, and we had worked really hard to develop lots of sponsorships around Small Business Week, okay? So we had a whole week's worth of activities. We had the Small Business Awards program. We had that judge. We were doing a lot of high-profile activity around Small Business Week. Well, some of the larger businesses were like, well, we want a program too. You know, we want awards. So they created the Best Places to Work Business Awards and went through that, which we had a good time working on that one. I kind of chuckled about who knew that that's where that one would go. So don't forget to listen and be creative and explore along the way what will work and what does not. Now, what you're getting ready, what you see on your screen now is something that I've cut and pasted from an online system of one of my clients. And it's simply a list of sponsorships. I would call it their table of contents, their sponsorships that are available. So I'm going to click through this, and I just want you to note the variety of activities and what's there. So, you know, you've got your banquet, you've got your business after hours, a planning retreat, an expo, a chairman's reception, board meetings, a parade, an outdoor expo, elected officials reception, leadership classes, youth and alumni, progress reports, under 40 exhibits, you know, membership, movies on the plaza. Just take a look at the vast majority. Now we're into memberships, nothing wrong with that. Now let's look at electronic media. We've got their e-newsletter, we've got Main Street e-news, we've got an app, we've got a banner on their website, we've got an ambassador program, boardrooms. Look at that, even a USB drive for the chamber. Innovation, truly it is, you know, you're as vast as your imagination. Fascinating to see what sponsors will choose. Now also, I would like for you to look on the next, and we're getting ready to take a question from you, have a question session, but I want to look at benefits. What do you give a sponsor? Quite often we're a little too general in our communication of what we offer a sponsor, or it's like, well, you know, really it'll be good. So we want to be very specific, because what we're offering, say you've got an event. Let's take your annual dinner, luncheon, meeting, gala, whatever you call your annual event. We're not talking about just getting exposure for our sponsors while they are at that 2 or 3 hour or 4 hour event. We're talking about all the marketing prior to the event, during the event, and after the event. So notice that this was a business after hours benefit that you're seeing on your screen. You'll see that distributed to 2,200 people in their email, 1,700 emails in their newsletter, printed newsletter, go to the 2,200 people. Be very specific. Let those sponsors know how many people are going to see their logo, see their branding, even if they don't attend the event. So that's one reason we want to get these sponsors early, is then we can actually give them their money's worth in the long run, not just slam it together at the last minute. We want to give them exposure in all of our pre-event publicity, then during the event, and then in our newsletters we write articles about it when it's complete. Now, we've got through a lot of information, so I want to take just a moment to see if there are some questions that we can field for just a few moments before we move to pricing.
Hi, Joyce. It's Crystal. Can you see the question in the pane? Joyce?
I do not. What would I click on?
Okay, I can read it for you.
Okay.
Has Joyce had any trouble with people turned off by chambers being 501c6 versus 501c3? We are non-tax deductible. How upfront are we about this when the C3s are also going after sponsorships and have added the bonus of a tax write-off?
Okay, you are very upfront about this. We make it very clear that we are tax deductible as a business expense, but it is not as if they are given to a foundation. Now, sometimes chambers have foundations and have 501c3 and 501c6. So when you have that, you make that clear that they get a different tax deduction for that. What they are purchasing here, for the most part, is marketing and advertising. So I rarely hear that come up as a stumbling block or an issue.
Okay. The next question is, how do you determine the price on the sponsorship levels? Is it tied to the size of the chamber membership?
Yes, we're getting ready to talk about that to some extent on pricing. That's our next section. As I said earlier, you know, an annual dinner sponsor in some communities would be $10,000 or $20,000 for the major sponsor. In other communities, it may be $500 or $1,000 if you're a tiny community. We look at your history. We look at what other chambers are doing around you. We look at the size of businesses. It's more of an art than science, quite frankly. But if you will Google Total Resource Campaigns or look at some of your other neighboring chambers, you're going to see a lot of pricing information. However, I want to defer the rest of the answer to that question, and because we're going to cover that pretty extensively in our next section.
Okay, and the last question is, how do you recommend getting a member to see the value of a sponsorship? We have specific companies that fit well with a specific event, audience and demographics, etc., and I still get rejected.
Okay. You know, when I was marketing sponsorship to the staff person, it was a little frustrating to me too, because sometimes they would even say to me, well, how much of this do you get? You know, it was like I felt like I was selling a copier or something, you know. So that was one reason I started utilizing volunteers. And again, too often as chamber professionals, we tend to go to the same people and we tend to ask for a favor, quite honestly. So what we need to do is create a healthy environment. So when we talk to our members, we are communicating to them that they have a niche market here. They can align themselves with the credibility of the chamber. People like to do business with hometown businesses. They like to do business with people who will invest in their community. Remember the Shapiro study that said, you know, a company is much more likely to do business with a business that's a member of the chamber than not. The same is true with sponsorship. So again, sell those benefits of the marketing that they are receiving. and make sure that they feel like the value is there. If the value is not there for them, we may be talking to them about either talking to that member about the wrong sponsorship that maybe doesn't fit their niche, or maybe they don't see the value yet, but somebody else will. There's nothing quite like creating value. To me, the value is when this is what I've sold it for. 2 years ago, I was working with a client, and we were looking at sponsors of the website. And they had 4 board members that had been sponsoring their website for a while, and, you know, they kind of felt like it was a favor. And we marked the price up pretty substantially. And one of the board members was like, oh, I'm not paying that. That's crazy. Nobody will pay that. Well, when those sold out in the first day, that board member came back and said, whoa, I want that now. And so we had to, you know, readdress that.
Okay, that was it for the questions right now.
Okay. Now we're going to move to pricing and talk a bit about that. There we go. Pricing. One size doesn't fit all. You'll notice that the prices weren't listed in our example. We have a wide variety of organizations today. I know when I left the Tulsa Chamber to start my consulting business, you know, we were a big metro chamber, and we got some really strong support and a lot of pricing because we had a lot of exposure and reach within the business community. I started working in smaller communities. I couldn't use those examples because it kind of freaks them out. Don't let the zeros, as I say, get in your way. But let 20,000 mean for a large chamber mean to you, maybe that's 2,000. Just keep in mind that we're creating value, okay? Think relativity of your community size, the quality of the event or publication. Some of our sponsorships, some of our events are quite frankly better than others, or the perception is that they're better than others. It's interesting to me as I create sponsorships for a wide variety of communities around the country, the same program sells extremely well in one community and maybe doesn't sell as well in another. That doesn't mean they've got a bad program. It may mean that we need to work on the marketing of that and the branding of that and some perception of that. So if we create the value there, then our members are going to be okay. And we don't have to sell everything. And we don't have to sell to the same people we've been selling to. I really think we kind of get hung up. We don't like to be rejected. And so if somebody says, that's too high, we tend to believe them. So we're marketing supply and demand here. We want to create value for the member while maximizing our non-dues revenue potential. We're placing the free market enterprise system within the not-for-profit organization. Not-for-profit is a tax classification, not a goal. It is okay to make money. So let's talk about that a little bit. We are marketing supply and demand. When we create exclusivity rather than logo soup, then we create an opportunity to mark our prices and give value for that. Yesterday I was working with a client, and we were looking at an entertainment sponsor, and they were drawing 7,500 to 10,000 people to a 4th of July event. So that's a big crowd, you know. So I was talking about that, and they were going to have a band, and I said, well, what about 2 $1,000 sponsorships for the band? Because I know if I said more, they would, you know, think I had lost my mind. And the staff person looked at me and said, oh, well, how would we do that? Because we're only paying $1,200 for the band, and how would I justify receiving $2,000 for that from that sponsor when the band didn't cost that much? Really, if we are going to do events, we have some sunk costs into that, and it is our opportunity to maximize our revenue wherever we can. It doesn't matter if we're making some money on that. In fact, that is our goal. And you're not promising your sponsor to spend that money on the band. You're promising your sponsor a crowd. You're promising your sponsor the opportunity for people to see their branding, see their name, to benefit from that advertising. So don't get that confused as you go through this. You are promising them event signage. You're promising them recognition in your newsletter. You're promising the recognition on your website. Your sponsorship contract doesn't state that the funds will be spent on the event. Occasionally, we may have underwriters for a program, but that's a different situation than a normal sponsorship. Today, we're talking about sponsorships, not underwriting. So for the sponsorships, we're providing opportunity to market their business by aligning themselves with our organization and its product. So how do we determine sponsorship price point? The short answer is what you can sell it for, you know, to be told. As you noted in our examples, we create a finite number of sponsorships with a range of prices that reflect exclusivity and their marketing benefit potential. We're marketing supply and demand along with prestige and influence. My experience in 13 years of consulting in the sponsorship revenue generation business and in total resource campaigns is we usually underprice our sponsorships. Of course, that's except when we are overpricing them. Many times we overcharge our friends for a few events and publications and with packages and tiered sponsorship systems, so we don't have to make too many sales calls or get too many rejections. Then we almost give away the smaller items to make them affordable to our quote-unquote smaller business members. Strive to create sponsorship options for all size businesses and budgets, as well as for target markets by a variety of your events and targeted communication pieces. Your relocation information is a perfect place for a realtor to market their business or a moving company to market their business. However, a healthcare summit and looking at the future of healthcare and the impact that has on business is a perfect place for a presenting sponsorship from the usually two local hospitals that would also be a part of that program. So very different budgets they have to work with, very different formats, but also very different target markets that you may want to look to. I like to create a variety of prices to fit all size budgets. And again, what we're getting ready to talk about sales methods, but creating an opportunity for volunteers to go out really create some interesting opportunities. Nothing establishes value like marking it sold. It is worth what it is selling for. And if you start seeing that I'll work with a client and they'll say, oh, our business after hours is sold for 2 years out. Well, that means you need to mark up your price on your business after hours. Mark it up. You don't have to mark it up $1,000. Mark it up $50. Mark it up $100. Mark it up, start bumping that price up a little bit. Again, think supply and demand. But XYZ company always does a September business after hours. Well, that's because it's working for them. So don't hesitate to start moving those prices up a little bit. On the other hand, I will have clients that say, oh, I don't think we're going to do business after hours anymore because the crowd's diminishing, it's unreliable. Some businesses get a good crowd, others get 5 people and we're embarrassed, So I don't think we're going to do those anymore. I always encourage them to put them in a TRC because as volunteers are out there, they know so many more businesses. And if you mark those prices to where it is an investment, your client is going to pay more attention to that. If we make things too cheap and easy, sometimes we get poor sponsors because they don't have the revenue to make it a great event. They don't have the ability to make it a great event. So position yourself in the market to where you're going to get a good response on that. Look at my notes here and see if I've left anything out before we move on. Volunteer selling sponsorships for higher prices than staff. That puzzled me for several years. Are we like poor salespeople? What's going on? Well, it really is not. It is rarely that. The situation is that business people choose to have a positive response with their peers. When they're dealing with a chamber staff person, they tend to want to negotiate a little bit. But if they're dealing with one of the companies they do business with, they're rarely do they negotiate price. They just sign up and move along. So we're getting ready to talk about sales methods, but I'd like to take some specific questions on pricing before we move into sales.
Joyce, we have a few questions. Would you like me to read them?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is we've listened to members on what they perceive as value for sponsorships, and they've had more asks, i.e. free golfers. To me, this seems like we are ending up giving out more money than we are getting in to help cover the cost of the event. How do you manage a demand from a sponsor in order to get their sponsorship?
You simply line that out very early. You absolutely must take those costs into consideration. And if you're having to negotiate to that point, there's something else going on here. So don't give away the farm. It's better not to have a sponsor than for it to cost you money, to have hard costs associated with that. So you need to find ways to give them marketing exposure and create benefits that are not costing you that kind of dollars. If you're having to give away 2 teams and a meal and tons and your logo on prizes that are expensive, it may be best not to get that sponsor. If you're getting a sponsor by giving them some signage, by putting their name on the marketing flyer for the golf tournament, letting them work the crowd when they're there, letting them give away their products while they're there, that's very different. So look to create benefits that don't have exorbitant inherent costs associated with them.
Okay. The next question is, we've been struggling with the first right of refusal with our presenting sponsorship. After speaking with other chambers, I have found that they will raise prices versus placing a time maximum on how long a company can be a presenting sponsor, 3 years, for example. We have companies who are mad because they have not had the chance to be the presenting sponsor due to first right of refusal. Do you have any feedback on that?
I do, and you're absolutely correct, but there's a couple of ways to look at that. I tend to go the marketing route, and I know that I am price sensitive, so if I have a lot of demand and something's been locked up a long time, I start kind of bumping that price up because they'll eventually generally kind of let that go. When I first started doing TRCs in Tulsa, it was interesting because we had a realtor that chose the relocation packet. I mean, that was back in the day when you mailed a lot of those. But we had a realtor that had locked that down, and we had right of first refusal. So it was creating challenges for me. In that regard. So what I did was I went to that realtor and I said, look, you've got right of refusal on this and you've had it for several years. However, we have other realtors that are not happy about this situation. So we've got a choice here. Either you can relinquish that and let me go ahead and move along, or I'm going to start my TRC over and take away all the first right of refusal so that I can unlock this. I just can't let this continue. And he understood, let it go, and we moved forward. Most of the time, if your price is strong and appropriate, you will find a healthy turnover on that. So maximize your price potential, and keep in mind your relationships.
Okay, and Joyce, can you quickly explain what a TRC is, what that means?
I will. I apologize. I didn't do that earlier. A total resource campaign in the shortest term is a sponsorship drive. It is creating your a la carte menu of everything you do with all of your prices, all of your benefits for all of your marketing opportunities for the year, and training volunteers to go out and sell that in an organized few weeks so that then your sponsorship recruitment is done. You're not calling throughout the year. You have a quote-unquote sponsorship season, marketing season, and then you're through with your sponsorship fundraising for the year. I apologize, I didn't go to that earlier. So it is utilizing volunteers to go sell them for you in a very organized fashion.
Okay. And then the last question I have is, what about the perception that every time members hear from us, we're selling them something?
Exactly, which is exactly why I went to doing TRCs. You know, it gets to where you feel like you can't, you know, your members don't want to take your phone call because they know you're going to ask them for something. And a lot of times, you know, in Tulsa, because we had a big staff of a lot of different program opportunities, we might have 3 people call them on the same day for something different because we didn't know who was calling whom in the process. So that's why I like creating the season. Even if you do it staff-wise, we're going to talk about sales methods just briefly, but create a time to go do that, and then you're not calling somebody every 2 weeks for something else, because I don't blame them for getting frustrated. Their frustration is not within the dollars they spend with us. It is in how we go about getting it. I refer to it as like taking your kid to the store, and if you give them an allowance and they can spend that and they choose what they want to spend it on, kind of cool. But if every time you walk in the store they're hounding you for a piece of candy, it kind of drives you nuts. We tend to do our members that way also. So create a time to go get that done and then let it go.
Joyce, do you have time for one more?
You tell me. Do I have time for one more?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, the question is, would you ever consider non-member sponsorship opportunities?
Personally, I don't. Now, and I say that there have been, I've done some projects in the home building industry, and they had some national manufacturers that wanted to sponsor some of their events, but they weren't a member of the, quote, local association. So what we did was we built that strong enough that we folded the membership into the price. I really strongly feel as a chamber they must be a member to play. How in the world can you justify to your member that may be their competitor, that you're allowing their competitor to market their business and they're not even a member? We are a member organization. I tend to feel pretty strongly about that. I know others disagree, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay, I have another question, so we'll just keep going until we have about 10 minutes left. So as long as the questions come in, I'll keep. Okay.
Okay. I want to cover some sales methods here in a little bit too, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Where do we get volunteers who like doing sales, especially if we're a small chamber? They join to get help from us, not to do work for us.
Okay, I'm really glad you asked that question, because one of the things that works for in this process is that it really does add value for the volunteer. I am a strong proponent of healthy relationships, and we need healthy relationships with our volunteers. So as they are, quote unquote, providing me with their time to help me recruit revenue, I am also providing them, as a chamber, I am providing them the opportunity to get out and network in the business community. I did a focus group last summer with a group of volunteers that had been doing total resource campaigns for a number of years, and they were all high performers. When I asked them why they keep doing this, their answer was that it is the best business development tool they had found. And that was across the board. It didn't matter if they were a VP at a bank or if they were an entrepreneur that just started a gift basket business. We are allowing them the opportunity to meet and network with people they otherwise could not meet and network with. So we must provide that volunteer value while they are doing the work for us. So part of it is learning how to approach that ask and making it very clear to them what they will receive and what you will receive, and that we're not asking them to do us a favor. We're coming into a relationship where we can help them and they can help us.
Okay. You ready to go forward?
I'd like to talk a little bit about sales methods, because that's kind of where we're going with this, and it won't take a lot of time. But what you see on your screen are, the sales methods that most of us use. Some of us will have a paid sales staff person that markets our sponsorships. Not too many of us do that, but some do. Sometimes it's the same person that sells your membership. That's a way to go about it. Quite often, we have the staff person that's in charge of the program selling the sponsorship. That's probably the most common way. You know, your CEO or yourself, you create a budget. You think, okay, I need to have this much revenue to make that work, and we go make that happen. Some of us create sponsorship packages because we're trying, again, to bundle it so we don't have to make so many sales calls and make that ask, or we do tiered dues for the kind of the same reason. Others will use committee members. Golf tournaments, a great example. You know, the golf committee has to go out and market the sponsorships. One of the challenges with the committee doing the fundraising of the sponsorships is, number one, kind of when they reach their goals, they quit. Also, sometimes it makes it hard to get good committee members because people don't want to have to go fundraise. So though they have talents and skills that would help us create an event, they avoid us because they don't want to have to go do the fundraising. The other part of that is if they do the fundraising, they tend to feel like they have ownership of that event. You know, great, there's a golf tournament, the golf committee raises a lot of money. A lot of times they think they should go spend that money on cool shirts or golf prizes or whatever, when frankly the chamber needs that to go to their bottom line to help them pay staff, to help them buy, you know, keep the lights on, to buy technology, whatever. We can't grow our organization if we're spending it as fast as it's coming in. And with program staff, I was working with a client yesterday, and they were talking about one of their sponsorships for this year, and they said, oh, that's full. I said, what do you mean that's full? Oh, well, I guess it's not full. It's just that we've met our budget on that, so we're not working on that one anymore. We tend to, when we get to a certain level, think that we're done selling sponsorships. Well, that may not be the income potential. It's just where we stop, because we've got so many other things to deal with. So I'll go back to TRC volunteers, and this is an unabashed bias on my part because I just see it work so well. Creating an arena to where you can put everything together and train volunteers to go market those for you, and an a la carte menu, you will find more revenue and more unusual companies to come sponsor. Remember, in an initial TRC, 50 to 80% of the companies who sponsor have never sponsored before. And I don't care, I've worked in towns of 5,000 people and 100 members, and I work in metro areas. It is always the same. It's really surprising who they will find. So if you don't want to do a TRC, or you're not real comfortable with that, look at a group. Find a way to make it work for you. I just really would like for you to think about the possibility. It will amaze you what they will do for you. When I started the TRC almost 20 years ago in Tulsa, some of those 10 volunteers are still there doing this 20 years later. They started because their boss told them to, or asked them to, or they felt sorry for me and wanted to help me out. They're still there because it's working for them and their business development. So I really want to encourage you to think about that. So we've got some wrap-up with some evaluation of sponsor satisfaction, but I'd like to take any questions that might be out there as far as sales methods or management of volunteers.
Okay, I'm going to go through I think I have 2 questions. For events like a golf tournament, would you allow non-members to play but not be able to gain recognition through the sponsorship, or would you not allow them to participate in the tournament?
I generally don't allow them to participate in the tournament unless they are a guest of one of my members. For instance, if a member buys a team, and one of his team members is not a member, well, obviously I'm going to let that team member play. But if it's a non-member wanting to buy a team and golf, I personally would probably say no.
Okay. The next question is, knowing my own personal buying habits, can't too many options overwhelm a buyer? How do you present so many options? That
is a great question. You are absolutely correct. So what we do is we train our volunteers to think about who they're calling. We don't ask these volunteers to do a lot of cold calling, quite frankly. We ask them to think about, okay, who are you getting ready to talk to and what would most benefit that business, and then narrow it down for them. Give them 3 or 4 options that probably most closely fit their marketing niche. So yes, you're correct. It can be too much. So boiling it down, being targeted, helping educate your volunteers on what you're doing so they can educate your members is a key part of this process.
Okay. Are your TRC volunteers the same as the Chamber's ambassadors?
Ambassadors are often part of the TRC volunteers, but it's a much wider group of people than that. I target mid to upper level management volunteers as well as ambassadors, and depending on the size of your community that can vary, but I do not rely on my ambassadors. If they want to participate, that's awesome. We love them, and often they're very, very good. But that's not who I totally rely on.
Okay. How long is a TRC campaign, and can new members be offered the leftovers when they sign up?
Yes. I think, would you give me that question again? I want to make sure I'm answering that correctly.
How long is a TRC campaign, and can non-members be offered the leftovers? I'm sorry, can new members be offered the leftovers when they sign up?
When they join?
Yeah.
Yes, the answer to that is yes. I think that's a really good way to go. And TRCs tend to last, depending on the size of your community, anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. You want to give them time to get it done. You know, you get diminishing returns if it gets too long. So it's going to be, and again, we're not asking them to sell every day during that. We're giving them time to get that done. So some of them will work 15 minutes a day doing it. Others will work an hour a week. Some will get it done in an hour when we start. Others won't do anything till the last day, and then they make it happen. So you create that time, but that's really the time frame.
Okay, last question. When you package your sponsorships and businesses commit up front, how do you handle going back to them when you start a new event and need sponsorship?
I need that question again, Crystal.
Sure. When you package your sponsorships and businesses commit up front, how do you handle going back to them when you start a new event and need sponsorships?
Okay.
So I guess that's assuming if you offer the sponsorships up front and then you start a new event and they've already sponsored something, how do you go back to them?
So let's say I'm going to assume that that the question means outside of your marketing, your sponsorship, quote unquote, season. Let's say the senator said they would come to our city and there's something that's come up legislatively. Suddenly we've got an event that we didn't know we were going to have. How did you do that?
Right.
Then I simply state that fact to my members. We have an event that's come up. We didn't know it was going to happen. If anyone is interested in sponsoring this, then you just move forward. It's not like anybody, you don't have to fall on your sword and take that. There's going to be somebody that will be interested in that. So don't get too, you know, don't draw the line too hard in the sand. Give yourself some ability to function.
Okay. We're coming up on the close of the hour. Did you want to wrap up?
I would love to. The next section that we were going to talk about is just evaluate satisfaction. I'm going to do this very quickly. Listen, 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 and then remember who you're listening to. Don't listen to just the whiners. Take it, sorry, but we all have them. Take a broad perspective and consider the source, but do listen. Survey after every event. I have a 5-question survey I send out to every sponsor every time. You want to do those quickly. If it's an issue, you want to get on it. You want to get on it quickly. Watch your trends. See what trends are there. See what's selling, what's not. Consider why. Be strategic in that. Look at your sales demand. If you have things that are selling really, really fast, then that means you may need more of those, or you may need to move your price up. Pay attention to that. There's lots of opportunity to succeed. And one of the beautiful things about being in the chamber business is we really get the opportunity to create all the time. It's a blessing and a curse. So be creative and think about that and make sure that your sponsors are as satisfied as possible. Now, because of time, you see on this last slide my company's website address. Because we knew we were going to have a lot of folks here and there might be some questions not able to be answered, send those in. I will post on this website, hopefully by the end of this week, answers to all of those questions. Also, if you need my contact information, you want to have a conversation, I'll be glad to do that. You won't get a sales pitch. You'll just get answers as best I can give them. But check out that website. We'll have a page up with some of the answers to some of the questions we didn't get to today.
Okay, and if you were not able to chat in your questions, please send your questions to me, cmoore, C-M-O-O-R-E, @acce.org, and I'll compile those questions for Joyce, and she will put them on the website with the answers. So, Joyce, thank you so much for being such a good sport with so many people. We will send out the recordings to all registrants tomorrow, and we look forward to working with you again soon.
Thanks so much. My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Where did you have your hair?